The following contains subject matter some viewers may find unsuitable for younger audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
In 1967, I wrote an anti-war song called Handsome Johnny for Richie Havens. It was about what was going on in Birmingham and elsewhere in the South. I was fortunate to meet some of the heroes of the civil rights movement and those who created its anthems. Every year, their numbers grow fewer. This film is a tribute to them and all that they've achieved.
Yeah.
Now, in order for us to know who we are, we got to know who we was. And once we know who we was, then we know who we're gonna be. You dig? Right. Bring 'em up with some pride.
The civil rights movement began with the teachings and the music of the church.
On my way to Canaan land. On my way to Canaan land.
Even in the days of slavery, spirituals drew a parallel between the Israelites enslaved in Egypt and African Americans enslaved here. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land, set my people free.
How important is gospel music to the soul genre? I guess it is the genesis of it. Not only of that genre, but I think it is the genesis of all music.
Everybody came out to church. That was required learning. We had to go to church. You have to understand that that was our survival during all of those struggle times and that kind of thing. It was all about our faith and the spiritual music that we held on to that was so much a part of us.
Basically about having felt the pain so deeply with no place else to go that you only can resort to the bottom of your soul to express the feeling.
The question is, did the music affect the movement? Or did the movement affect the music? And it's one of those chicken and egg kind of questions.
I think life governs what people are feeling musically.
The music was the soul of the movement.
It just seemed like that's what made it happen.
In 1939, a left-leaning New York schoolteacher, Abel Meeropol, wrote a song protesting the lynching of African Americans. He pulled no punches.
Southern trees bear strange fruit.
You can do so many things with lyrics for the song, whether it's rap, whether it's R&B, whether it's gospel, even jazz.
Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze.
I was born in New Orleans. Your parents had to teach you to live in a segregated South because one misstep could cost you your life.
I was looking at a picture once of a lynching in the paper. My mother came and she took the paper away from me because I couldn't sleep from the horror of things.
Between 1889 and the year this song was written, There were nearly 4,000 documented lynchings in the United States.
Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees.
Because during that time, man, they was hanging us. They was putting us in the Pearl River. They was doing all kinds of things to us.
Pastoral scene of the gallant South. The bulging eyes and the twisted mouth.
Meerpold's song encouraged other left-leaning singing songwriters like Pete Seeger to funnel their outrage into music.
When you sing, all that experience goes into that song. All of those things that you lived through goes into that song.
And I think that's where the music comes from, and that's where the stories and the lyrics that come from. They got to be part of the underpinning and the foundation for this marriage between the civil rights movement and music.
For the rain together, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rock, for the tree to drop. Here is a strange and bitter cry.
The voice of protest began to be heard outside the church.
When I was born into this world, this is what happened to me. I was never called a man, and now I'm 53. I wonder when.
Back in the 1930s, Brunzi was one of the first Chicago blues stars. But he'd grown up down south, and he began writing about the South as he knew it.
You know, what you really have to do is put on the 1948 glasses, as the historians say, and look at that world in 1948. Memphis was already 40% black, and no one even cared about it. And you look at the music that was being played on the radio at that particular time. So what you're getting is, I'm looking over a four-leaf clover, or how much is that doggy in the window? It was as if the African-American community was invisible, like they didn't exist.
They said I was uneducated, my clothes was worn and torn. Now I've got a little education, but I'm a boy right on. I wonder when.
About the years of the Second World War, there were basically no radio stations that played anything by black people.
You had a printed media, African-American magazines. Those things existed for years, but no one was pitching that programming at the black audience electronically.
Now, WDIA presents Anything Goes. Anything Goes, the gospel show where anything can happen.
The station started out as an all-white station. They tried everything, all kinds of music, various kinds of music, and it simply wasn't working. They couldn't do anything in the ratings. Up until that time, you were dealing with the old stereotypes in the media. And so they decided to try an African-American announcer in 1948. Nat Williams comes on the air, and he's put on for an hour or so, and the station is, of course, inundated with all these letters.
From the home of colorful old Beale Street, the place where the blues began in Memphis, Tennessee.
Stars of the 50s and 60s were influenced by WDIA. Riley King became BB at WDIA, and across town, Elvis Presley was listening and learning.
Suddenly they realized they'd struck a gold mine. It was revolutionary. It gave black people an identity. It gave black people a radio station that they could call their own.
I heard my first black broadcast on the radio station WDIA, Nat D. Williams.
It took them about a year. It was about the summer of '49 before it was an all-black station.
You know, it's just like when we were coming up, we went to all-black schools. We didn't know nothing but that. And we had our own little world. But when they started to integrate schools, we got a chance to know another culture and another way of living. And I think that's what happened with black music.
This is Rufus Thomas of Sepia Swing. Gonna try to make you laugh and sing. Gonna have a ball, my all I'm giving. Say it, sister. Say it, brother. Say it.
Man, I'm really living.
That's right.
You've got to understand the enormous audience the WDIA had. When they went 50,000 watts, they boomed their signal directionally, and it went due south, right into the heart of the Delta. They were hitting 10% of the total African-American community in the United States, 1.5 million people.
Now listen, I want you to listen to me now as I talk to you about Martha White Flower.
Pink Pussycat Wine, the New York State wine. I repeat, Pink Pussycat Wine.
Not only is it tearing down the walls of segregation, not only is it appealing to that black audience and empowering black people, but it's also making black music acceptable and respectable to the white mainstream.
The more popular it got, the more it filtered out into other areas and to other peoples and communities.
You've been listening to the award-winning Public Affairs Forum, Brown America Speaks, and to the personal opinions of informed and well-known Memphis and Mid-South citizens. Listen for another interesting forum discussion of a controversial...
The floodgates were open. Almost immediately, you got a station in Birmingham, a station in Atlanta, become an all-black program station. All the radio stations across the country began to incorporate some African-American programming in their daily output.
You could get WLAC, about 8 o'clock it would be white gospel. And by 10 o'clock it became black gospel, and then at 11 it became rhythm and blues. And that went on till like about 2 in the morning.
The new R&B stations played songs that had more heart and soul than the music on mainstream stations. And sometimes that music had a message.
Oh, we're knocking at the pearly gates. Oh, knock, 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 asking about the rooms, about the rates. Oh, knock, knock.
The media dramatically impacted the direction of the civil rights movement because it was coming over the radio, it was coming over the TV.
Well, old St. Peter was the official greeter. He was present to let them in. Some looked down because the skins were brown, but old Pete hollered with a great big grin. You welcome, y'all come on in. There were no restricted signs in heaven.
I watched a lot of television, national news, to find out what was happening in Alabama, what was happening in Arkansas, what was happening in Georgia, and other southern states. And that's when realization began to set in within my mind, within my heart, that, hey, something is wrong.
They looked around and what did they see? Two black angels, white angels, sons of David and Chinese. You didn't have to look swell for this hotel. You could even come in your dungarees. You were welcome, welcome.
Before long, African-American music found an audience it hadn't counted on.
I grew up listening to Paul Robeson songs. I grew up listening to the Golden Gate Quartet.
Music engaged and energized a generation of young people, black and white. They weren't going to accept the old excuse, it's always been that way.
As an individual, I was ready to get involved and to participate in something to change our situations. Ever since I can remember, I resented our conditions.
And he spoke to the young in their native tongue. You are all my guest. If you keep in mind that there are no restricted signs in heaven, no restricted clientele, there are no restricted signs in heaven. Brother, brother, that goes double. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
White listeners were few, but they were there.
I would go to parties, and typically The music would be Elvis Presley or Pat Boone. But for me, I knew that what Little Richard was singing was very different from what Pat Boone was singing, even when Pat Boone sang the same song. What it had to do with was a kind of creativity which was not coming from the immediate world that I was in, of white people. And I knew that very few people in my class, in high school again, would be interested in that music because it was too, as so to speak, colored. It was too tainted. It was too outside. And in some way, that's exactly what I liked about it. And certainly there was a connection between listening to that music and going on the freedom rides, no doubt.
On my way, Canaan land. I'm on my way, well, Canaan land. On my way, oh yes, Canaan land.
The early civil rights leaders were mostly from the church. So it was no surprise that most of the early civil rights music was also from the church. That would change soon enough.
Now, Martin Luther King was part of the middle-class Baptist church, and I was part of the middle-class Congregational church. But the movement was, by and large, the masses. And they were much closer to the spirituals, and not the spirituals as arranged by the Fifth Jubilee singers. See, but the spirituals as Mahalia and the old-time gospel singers sang them, the Five Blind Boys of Alabama. We used to listen to that every morning in my house, and that's the way you started your Sunday.
Well, free at last, thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. One day I was walking alone. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. I heard a voice, but I saw no one. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last.
Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. The words of that old spiritual would stay with the young minister, Martin Luther King Jr. Years later, he'd make those words into the cornerstone of one of his most famous speeches.
Well, being raised up in the Baptist church, music is very strong with us. Music helps you to focus on where you're going and the words and the beat. But when you hear it, it's like someone give you a pill and you're feeling bad, and this pill kind of perks you up. The song that stick with me is I Shall Not Be Moved. I Shall Not Be Moved. And that one helped me in a demonstration once in Nashville. This is 60. This was at a stand-in at the theaters, and this fella walked up to me, white fella, with a cigarette, and he said he's gonna put it out on my face. And so what was in my head then is I shall not be moved.
Shall not be moved.
In the moment that I'm standing there, I'm thinking about that. We should not be moved and sending my mind, putting my mind strongly on that. I think what made him turn around, he didn't see fear. I think he saw a strong person there. And he didn't see any fear on my face.
One day, I heard a voice.
When I was 20, Ezel Blair and the 3 other young men from North Carolina A&T in 1961 started the sit-ins. They were my first role models. They provided me with a picture of what it meant to be, in effect, what it meant to be a citizen. When the Freedom Ride started the next spring, I was very excited about that and went to a fundraiser that the Congress of Racial Equality had arranged. And I remember looking at my girlfriend Winnie and saying, I'm going.
My parents were a young, hip couple. So the struggles that were going on in the South at that particular time and heard about on the radio, read about in Ebony and Jet. As a kid, you couldn't help but to be kind of conscious of the fact that there was something going on that wasn't fun and games, that was really, serious. Because the music of that time was that of inspiration, hope.
The Freedom Rides actually started by CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. The bus in Anniston was bombed, and the Trailway bus went to Birmingham, and that's where they would pull off. And the Freedom Rides was beaten. Jim Pack had about 50 stitches, closed his wounds in his head. And Governor John Patterson at that time refused to give any kind of local protection to the Freedom Riders.
Explosive demonstrations rocked the North as well as the South as Negroes struggled for equal opportunities.
And what really sticks in my mind, which I can almost see them now, is the white women with the babies screaming, kill them, kill them.
The real test of nonviolence is not how much violence is perpetrated against you, but it's your response. How do you respond to violence? CORE decided that they would respond to Robert Kennedy's request, and that was to have a cooling off period rather than getting someone killed.
When CORE decided that it was too dangerous to continue, we said it must continue. We can't stop here. We must go through. I was ready.
When you're 18, you tend not to be as afraid. We left at night because we would not be as visible to people outside the bus. We were not attacked en route. The trip to the Jackson bus terminal was without incident. And what I do remember is getting off the bus. The nervousness that I had begun to feel when I got off the bus, this sudden anxiety that I could be seriously hurt. I had never felt that before. Being black meant you felt that a lot. There was a paddy wagon outside, there were cops, there was a crowd. And then there was noise, we were pushed, we were shoved, people tried to punch us. I was not familiar with that kind of unbridled hatred.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around.
It was 1960. The white backlash was only beginning. It too had music, but it was the music of intolerance and hatred.
I recall the group going inside the Greyhound bus station, which was located on Lamarck Street. A friend of mine, we kind of went over to see what was happening. I ended up inside of the Greyhound bus station, and there I was arrested. I was 14 at the time.
Ain't gonna let no fear turn me around.
It was in jail that Peck Watkins and those around him learned how to draw strength from the movement's song.
Turn me around. Keep on talking, marching up to freedom line.
We was in jail here in Jackson. It was a 20-bed cell. I recall the guards would come in at night and throw keys and throw different objects in the cell on us. And we decided that, hey, this is enough, no more, no more. I recall quite vividly a guy by the name of James Bevel, black minister during the time. And he started off, ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round. And man, it seemed as though his voice of the song just more or less energized all of us.
Ain't gonna let intimidation turn me round. Turn me round. Turn me round. Let intimidation turn me round. Keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching up to freedom land.
Over in Birmingham, Alabama, Martin Luther King was leading the struggle. We would move out of the 16th Street Baptist Church day after day, he would write later. By the hundreds, we would move out. And Police Commissioner Bull Connor would tell them to send the dogs forth, and they did come. But we just went before the dogs singing, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around.
We began singing the song, and we kind of changed ourselves together.
Turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking and just keep on a talking while I'm marching up to freedom land.
And we was ready for whatever came through that door. Whatever they put on us that day, we was gonna put it back on them. And I really think they had a sense of something, because we were singing all the time. You know, that's basically what we did, sang songs. But this particular song, and at this particular moment, we felt like Hercules.
Oh, don't you let nobody turn you round.
The freedom songs worked two ways. They inspired those in jail and irritated their guards. When Birmingham's notorious police commissioner, Bull Connor, let the young protesters out of jail, he told the reporters that the singing was making him sick.
And for whatever reason, a reason they chose not to come in that day. And I can sit back now and say, I'm glad they didn't.
Turn me round. Gonna let no fear, Lord. Turn me round. Gonna keep on a walking.
There's a lot of days in jail that, like I said, we didn't have anything to do but sing.
Ain't gonna let intimidation turn me round.
I was beaten several times in the jail, and the only recourse we had was to sing. I recall not being fed for several days. The only thing we could do was sing. I remember the water being cut off, and everybody was defecating, but it couldn't be flushed, and there was an odor. What could you do? Sing.
Turn me round.
And those songs, it puts you in another state of mind. It takes you away from what is at hand. It just made a difference.
During the movement's early days, very few African-American entertainers openly associated themselves with it. But one who supported it in person and could always be called upon for money was Harry Belafonte. And Belafonte recorded many of the spirituals that were still driving the movement.
The old gospel stuff was translated, and a lot of that was became movement songs, and just with new lyrics.
And before I did sleep, I did in my grave and go home to my Lord.
It was poetry. They became as almost as common as love songs, and also direction songs.
I think the civil rights movement was a watershed for America, for the world. And I'm proud that music played a part in it. I get too much credit because I introduced some songs, but I didn't write them. And the people who really used them were heroic people in places like Alabama and Mississippi.
Here's to the state of Mississippi, for underneath her borders the devil draws no line. If you drag her muddy rivers, nameless bodies you will find.
25 years after Abe Maripol wrote Strange Fruit, young folk singers like Phil Oakes and Bob Dylan began writing topical songs that seethed with indignation.
The folk community and the things that were happening in America were extraordinarily intimate for us, and yet we were very far from it. And there was a shyness about why do white kids care about our stories? But somehow that blew over. When I came to BU Theater School in 1958, Joan Baez and I were in the same class. Dylan was in and out of the Cambridge scene back in those days. He sort of picked up his Cambridge tribe, and there were about 8 of us. There was a sense of empowerment that we were sort of handed through the music, and we could choose to turn around and be better people.
It's a long walk to D.C., but I got my walking shoes on.
We were in Montgomery, Alabama. Pop said, this man Martin is here. And I like his message. He'd been hearing Dr. King on the radio. And he said, he has a church here. I want to go to this 11 o'clock service. Do you all want to go? We said, yeah, Dad, we want to go. We went to Dr. King's church. He said, I'm glad to have Pop Staples and his daughters here. When the service was over, Dr. King would stand at the door. Then Pops, he stood there and talked to him for a while. Well, after Pops finally came on, we went back to the hotel. He called us to his room. He said, listen, y'all, I really like this man's message. I really like his message. And I think that if he can preach it, we can sing it. And we began writing freedom songs. We joined the movement. Then we wrote this A Long Walk to D.C., but I got my walking shoes on.
I gotta see the president. No matter what it takes, I tell you it's a long walk to D.C., yeah. But I'm on, oh, yes I am. Oh, yeah, but I know I'll make it someday. I know it's a whole lot of rocks and reels.
And it brought home to us a thing that has never changed in most of us, that there were things that needed fixing in this country.
I don't think there was any political movement in history that had as much singing as the civil rights movement had, right from the start. December 1955, when the bus boycott started, right up through the 60s, new songs every month. Quite often there were gospel songs with new words. I learned We Shall Overcome in 1946 or 7 from Zilphia Horton. However, it was a fellow 10 years younger than I, Guy Carawan, who introduced it to the young members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC for short. And they said, oh, this is a song. And a month later, it was all through the country. Not just a song, it was the song. And they gave it the gospel beat. And they added this holding hands crossed. Your left hand holds the right hand of somebody to your right, and your right hand holds the left hand of somebody to your left. And you sway. The song's going around the world. South Africa knows it. India, it's sung in all the schools of India in their local language. Astonishing.
We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand.
I mean, you sang up on your nerve. And you get knocked down, you get back up, and you go on again. You don't stop. The message of the music carries you forward when you don't understand and you can't argue it logically.
We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. Today,
white, black, everybody was writing songs. When I look at my songbooks, they came from everywhere.
How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man?
Just a few weeks before the March on Washington, a folk trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary, recorded a song by a little-known singer and songwriter, Bob Dylan. They sang it in Washington for the hundreds of thousands there that day, and the millions more watching on television. It was a song that Dylan had set to an old spiritual, "No more auction block for me."
The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Music was as varied as the people, but there was always music. I say the reason communism failed in the South is they don't sing.
Yes, and how many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? Yes, and how many ears must one man have before he can hear people cry? Yes, and how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
One more classic came indirectly from the March on Washington. Sam Cooke heard the song Blowing in the Wind, and he decided that rhythm and blues needed to catch up with the times. So he resolved to write a song. And then a few weeks later, he was trying to register in an all-white Holiday Inn, and he was arrested for disturbing the peace. That song is "A Change Is Gonna Come." Now, Sam, he never lived to hear that song come out because he was killed just as it was released.
I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change has gotta come now.
Otis Redding did a lot of other Sam Cooke songs on his albums, but his version of "A Change Is Gonna Come" might be the most soulful of all the versions, and there's been dozens and dozens of versions of that song, but I don't think anyone ever made it better than Otis Redding.
Long time coming, I know, change has gotta come. Oh, yes, it is now. There's a time I will go to my brother. Oh, I've asked my brother, will you help me please? Oh, now, he turned me down, and then I asked my dear mother. Oh, I said, mother, I'm down on my knees. It's been a time that I thought, Lord, this could last very long. Oh, now, somehow I thought I was still able to try to carry on. It's been a long.
When I hear songs like "A Change Is Gonna Come," I reflect back to what I was doing when that record came out. Was I was in jail? Was I going to a community organization?
Change was coming. In July 1964, nearly a year after the March on Washington, America's new president, Lyndon Johnson, signed the landmark Civil Rights Bill, integrating schools and outlawing discrimination in public places. That same year, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, everybody was watching TV. Yeah, everybody saw what was happening, particularly down south, with the water hoses and everything else negative that was happening at that time. So naturally, a change is going to come meant a lot to a lot of people.
Somehow I thought I was still able to try to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know.
When we started the movement in a town, the way we started was we went in singing the old spirituals that they sang, see? And then we gradually switched those into freedom songs.
Songs was very important because this is one of the ways we determined whether or not a community was ready for a movement. The first song that people actually sang in Selma, Alabama, it was actually three little girls, started singing this song. And these three little girls was the thing that really inspired me when they started singing Freedom Is A-Comin'. And no one taught them this song. They made it up themselves. And then people just continued to add to them. And it was something like, freedom is a-coming, and it won't be long. Freedom is a-coming, help us sing this song. Freedom is a-coming, and it won't be long. If you want to be free, come and go with me. Oh, we are fighting for our equal rights, so come on, join in the fight. We're singing along, I hope we're not alone.
People get ready, there's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the dealers humming. Don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord.
The singing was a form of protest, but more than that, a song was what you call healing for us, because we suffered many wounds.
People Get Ready wasn't an angry song. It was almost blissful. But as one civil rights activist said, it was warrior music. The music you listen to while preparing for a march or demonstration.
Those were the songs that the disc jockeys played, and they selected those, see. They could not make any announcements even about our mass meetings, and they could not report, but they always attended our mass meetings. And they always found some way to use some songs to let people know. I mean, that one I remember in that context was People Get Ready.
Well, Curtis started in a gospel group, and Jerry Butler was also in that group for a time, and that became essentially the Impressions.
Curtis Mayfield was one of the real legitimate geniuses of our time, and it was out of his playing and out of his concept of music that the Impressions became what they were.
If you listen to the Impressions music, People Get Ready, or Amen, Meeting Over Yonder, you really hear the gospel roots coming right out of Curtis. He was trying to be socially conscious about the civil rights movement and the plight of his people at that time.
People get ready, there's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord.
Years later, a panel of musicians and songwriters, including Paul McCartney and Brian Wilson, voted People Get Ready one of the 10 best songs of all time.
There ain't no room for the hopeless sinner who would hurt all mankind. Savior's own. Have pity on those whose chances grow thinner, for there's no hiding place against the kingdom's throne. You know there's no hiding place. There's no hiding place. So people get ready. There's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage. You just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the Jesus humming. You don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord. I say you just thank the Lord. You just thank the Lord. That's why I'm here to say that I believe. I believe we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it as a human race. People, I believe. I believe. I believe. You don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord. People get ready. People get ready now.
We were successfully doing something every day that could not be achieved outside the studios. Firstly, we'd integrated. That was unique. That is part of the life of creative people, in that we live in a place that's a little different, because what we do creatively is try to interpret what's going on around us.
Until the Civil Rights Act, it was illegal for black and white musicians to perform together on stage in Memphis. But they worked together in the Stack Studio to produce hits for Otis Redding, Sam and Dave, and many, many others.
We worked quite well together. I think that was the first, as I knew it, the first integrated session musicians in the studio, Stacks. It was in the forefront. We did a lot of groundbreaking things. I remember the first integrated band playing a nightclub was Ben Branch. He hired a guitarist, white boy named Charlie Freeman. And it was a big deal. Can you believe it? In those days, white boy playing with a bunch of black guys, it was a big deal.
But it was about be free, be your own person. How do you relate to others? How do you think about others? How do you demand respect for your own dignity and dignify others?
But progress was slow. Too slow for some.
We were tired. We weren't going to take it anymore. And the song started to reflect that.
Hound dogs on my trail, school children sitting in jail. Black cat crossed my path. I think every day's gonna be my last. Lord, have mercy on this land of mine. We all gonna get it in due time. I don't belong here, I don't belong there. I've even stopped believing in prayer. Don't tell me, I'll tell you. Me and my people just about do. I've been there, so I know. They keep on saying, go slow. That's what they say, go slow. That's what they say, go slow. That's what's the trouble. Slow. Washing the windows. Slow. Picking the cotton. Slow. When nothing but rotten. Slow. We're too lazy. Slow. Our thinking's crazy. Slow. Where am I going? What am I doing? I don't know. I don't know. Just try to do your very best. Stand up, be counted with all the rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi.
The song is Simone's response to the murder of civil rights worker Medgar Evers and the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham.
Picket line, school boycotts,
They try to say it's a communist plot, but all I want is equality for my sister, my brother, my people, and me. My people and me. You lied to me all these years. You told me to wash and clean my ears and talk real fine, just like a lady. You'd stop calling me Sister Sadie. No, but my country's full of lies. We all gonna die and die like flies. 'Cause I don't trust nobody anymore. They keep on saying, go slow. Yeah, that's what they say. Go slow. Well, that's just the trouble. Desegregation, mass participation, unification, do things gradually, will bring more tragedy. Why don't you see it? Why don't you feel it? I don't know. You don't have to live next to me, just give me my equality. Everybody knows about Mississippi. Everybody knows about Alabama. Everybody knows about Mississippi. That's it.
It's just like one of those things that you can't separate the news from the music. You can't separate the pictures from the voices. Why is my mother wearing an afro as opposed to 3 years ago she was wearing a wig?
The social movements, the movements of protest became violent. Nonviolence was dropped very happily by many in the black movement and in the white movements of the 1960s.
You're going to sit in front of your television set and listen to LBJ tell you that violence never accomplishes anything, my fellow Americans.
1967, the civil rights movement is fast giving way to the Black Power movement.
The real problem with violence is that we have never been violent. We have been too nonviolent.
The national rhetoric becomes so charged that when Aretha Franklin records Respect, which was originally intended to be a love song, it became an anthem of Black Power.
Precious Lord.
1968, April 4th, I was with Martin Luther King in Memphis. We'd had a staff meeting previously in Atlanta, planning for the Poor People's Campaign.
Let me stand.
And they kept calling on him in Memphis, if he could just come to Memphis just for one day. So we regrouped the staff and we all went to Memphis.
I am weak. I am one.
So we started talking that night, the 3rd of April, on the general campaign and what we were supposed to do. Next morning, I got this thing laid out, so we were talking after the staff meeting about the Poor People's Campaign and what I was going to do in Washington, D.C. Out of the blue, Martin Luther King said to me, we were there alone in the room, he says, "Now, Bernard, the next campaign we're going to have is to institutionalize and internationalize nonviolence."
Take my hand.
Those last words.
Precious Lord.
At the funeral, Mahalia Jackson, Martin Luther King's favorite singer, performs Precious Lord, Take My Hand. Just minutes before he was shot, King had asked musician Ben Branch to play the hymn at the meeting scheduled for that night. The assassination touches off riots in more than 125 cities across the country.
Sniper is only a coward, not a hero. And an uncontrolled or uncontrollable mob is only the voice of madness, not the voice of the people.
Dr. King's assassination impacted everybody at Stax. Musically, I shut down. I couldn't write. I couldn't do anything. I was so bitter because they killed my leader. But I realized that I was better suited in what I do best. I could influence people with music.
In 1968, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, the riots started. The mayor of Boston, then Kevin White, decided to cancel the concert that was scheduled at the Boston Garden with James Brown. James got on the radio and he appealed to folks to calm down, and instead of coming out to the concert, that he made an arrangement with Channel 2, a PBS station, to broadcast the show live on television.
This country owes a great thanks to James Brown, and we're lucky that we have him here tonight with us. Give another round of applause for James Brown.
They could stay home and watch him do the show. Didn't have to buy a ticket. And James Brown went on and did that show, and it was fantastic. It really saved the city of Boston because that night was very, very peaceful. Most everybody was home watching their TV and watching James Brown.
James Brown said it all for me when I was young. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. It said it all.
Say it loud. Say it loud. Some says malice, some says a lot of nerve. So we can't quit moving, get what we deserve. I've been buked, and I'm scorned. Talk about baby, sure as you're born. Just as sure as it takes you out.
now, Sheila. Say it loud. Let me hear you. Say it loud. Say it loud. Say it loud. Get down. Get down. Get down. Get down. Get down.
Before Say It Loud, black was an insult. After Say It Loud, black was all about pride. One song made all the difference.
Get on the train. Come on. Come on. Get it. Get it. Get it. Get it.
In Motown's early days, the company had shied away from political songs. But by the early 70s, it was America's most successful ever black-owned record label, and its artists were ready to take a stand.
Heaven help the child who never had a home. Heaven help the girl who walks the streets alone. Heaven help the roses if the bombs begin to fall.
I think that we could do better. I think that races, blacks and whites, can start getting along together, and that's what...
Heaven help the black man if he struggles one more day. Heaven help the white man if he turns his back away. Heaven help the man who kicks the man as they crawl. Heaven help us all. Heaven help us all. Heaven help us all. Heaven help us, Lord, here I call when we fall. Heaven help the boy.
What has violence ever accomplished? What has it ever created?
In 1968, the country lost Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And outside the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, police brutally attacked demonstrators protesting the Vietnam War.
Mr. Chairman, most delegates to this convention do not know that thousands of young people are being beaten in the streets of Chicago.
With George McGovern as President of the United States, we wouldn't have to have Gestapo tactics in the streets of Chicago.
And then in 1970, during an anti-war demonstration at Kent State University in Ohio, National Guard troops shot and killed 4 student protesters.
Hatred from the mighty, and the mighty from the small, yeah. Heaven help us all.
Now, it was time for musicians to try to pull the country together. Artists like Stevie Wonder cried out that survival in America didn't have to mean bleaching your soul or sacrificing your humanity. But there was no getting around the fact that the country had abandoned some of the movement's non-violent ideals.
Don't you know it? We need you down here, Lord, to help us.
The times were reflected in the music. We sang about some of our experiences, and that's what a lot of the music was about, some of the times we had come through and what people needed to be doing.
Curtis Mayfield and Keep On Pushing, Otis Redding and R-E-S-P-E-C-T, Find Out What It Means to Me. And then you come down to Marvin Gaye even.
And the album is What's Going On. It is, to my mind, one of the most soulful, poignant messages about the world and its situation that I've heard from any singer at any time.
Mother
mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. Oh, it's not the answer, for only love can conquer. You know we've got to find a way to bring some loving. Oh, yeah, today. Picket lights, picket signs, punish me with brutality. Talk to me, honey, so you can see what's going on. What's going on? Hey, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. Woo!
Marvin Gaye's brother had come back from Vietnam a bitter and disillusioned man. Marvin began looking outside the cocoon of his life. My blood started to boil, he said. I had an anger, an energy, an artistic point of view. What's going on was a suite of songs that addressed the world as he saw it. Hypocrisy, callousness, racism. Can we not do better than this? What had happened to the idealism of just a few years earlier?
Everybody thinks we're wrong, they do. But who are they to judge us? Simply cause our hair is long. People, you know, we've got to find a way to bring some understanding here today. Picket lights, picket signs. People don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me, talk to me, talk to me, so you can see what's going on. What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? Wanna know what's going on? All right. I wanna know what's going on, baby. Yes, I wanna know what's going on right now, people.
It's a music that has transcended and gone above everything that society said we were not allowed to do. Black people, white people, all colors of people have enjoyed this music. And no matter what comes and what goes, they're not ever gonna really get rid of it. It's too basic, it's too real.
I know a place. Oh, ain't nobody crying.
The Staple Singers had been there from the beginning. Moving to Stax Records in Memphis, they came back with something new. A little bit of gospel, a little bit of soul, even a little bit of reggae. But they were still calling for a remade America where ain't nobody crying.
Jump on, somebody help me. I'll take it, yeah. Help me now, I'll take it. Help me now, I'll take it. Help me, I'll take it there. Mercy, I'll take it there. Let me take it there. I'll take it there. Let me take it there. Play a piano. All right.
was 1972, and I'll Take You There became one of the records of the year.
The music has been the lifeblood of the movement. It runs throughout the veins of the movement. So you don't just hear the songs with your ears, but the music is one of the forces for the soul, and it empowers people.
In Jamaica, Bob Marley grew up listening to Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions, Sam Cooke, and Otis Redding. In 1966, he worked at a Chrysler plant in Delaware, and when he went home, he brought the music and the message of civil rights to his own music.
Stand up for your right. Don't get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. 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 No. Don't give up the fight. Don't give up the fight. Sick and tired of your hissin' schism. Time to go to heaven in a hism schism. We know and we understand. Almighty God is a living man. You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Now you see the light. Stand up for your right. 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 Stand up for your right.
Artists have to be encouraged to really feel it out. Have to also be aware of history and geography, which most Americans have been kept away from. You know, they wait for history to be packaged and sold to them. You'll end up waiting forever.
Half a World Away, a revolution in four-part harmony had been underway for years. This one to liberate millions of black South Africans from the yoke of apartheid.
Bring back Nelson Mandela, bring him back home to Soweto. We want to see him walking down the streets of South Africa. Tomorrow, bring back Nelson Mandela, bring him back home to Soweto. I want to see him walking hand in hand with Winnie Mandela.
In 1948, the British colony of South Africa institutionalized racism under a system called apartheid. In many ways, it was more discriminatory than segregation in the American South. Decades of harsh oppression followed. Musicians who left South Africa, like Hugh Masekela and Miriam Makeba, helped tell the world what was happening there and helped to make South Africa a pariah state. It would take a violent struggle and many deaths before apartheid could finally be brought to its knees, and it could never have been done without music. Nelson Mandela, who'd come to symbolize resistance to apartheid, was finally freed from jail in 1990. He'd been in prison since 1964. Apartheid crumbled soon after.
I want to see him walking down the
Back in the United States, the gains of the civil rights movement hadn't made much difference to the lives of many African Americans. The mean streets of America's ghettos would soon echo to a new sound.
I didn't start getting involved in creating music and being involved in the playing of music until I was about 19 and 20. I saw a lot of people around me being kind of swept in from another musical point of view that just didn't let them get the goods. So I saw that change come on of music kind of like saying nothing to people.
Anything can be soulful if it's done with the spirit from here. What kind of spirit can be a question here, because it doesn't all the time have to be a positive spirit that we're dealing with.
You can do so many things with lyrics, within a song. And I think if they are there, we can take those lyrics over into our daily life, our daily activity, even at work, at play.
In the beginning, rap music is protest music born in the streets and ghettos of urban America. Many early rap performers took their cue from James Brown and classic funk.
Broken glass everywhere, people pissing on the stage, you know they just don't care. I can't take the smell, can't take the noise, got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back, junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far, cause a man with a tow truck repossessed my car. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. Standing on the front stoop, hanging out the window, watching all the cars go by, roaring as the breezes blow. A crazy lady living in a bag, eating out of garbage pails, used to be a hag, such a dance to tango, skip the life and dango. A zircon princess seemed to lost her senses. Down at the peep show, watching all the creeps, so she could tell her stories to the girls back home. She went to the city and got so did it. She had to get a pimp, she couldn't make it on her own. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. My brother's doing fast on my mother's TV, says she watches too much.
So when I'm first hearing Fight the Power in the 70s, as a young teenager, I'm struck by the fact this is the first record I heard a curse word in, but the curse just isn't just said for no reason. The curse is applied to a condition that was happening at that particular time that people were tired of.
I tried to play my music, play my music so loud.
It was the Isley Brothers' lead singer, Ronald Isley, who told the world that it was going down. Because he said that's what everyone needed to hear.
I made Fight the Power with my team in 1988 for the Spike Lee Do the Right Thing soundtrack. We wanted to be just as jarring.
2007, a number, another summer. Hey, sound of the trouble. You can hear in your heart, cause I know you got soul. Hey, listen if you're missing, y'all. Swing it while I'm singing. Give it while you can. No, I know it. While the black bear sweating. And the rhythm I'm rolling. Cause it comes what we want. Right, give us what we need.
From the beginning, Public Enemy was known for politically charged lyrics, criticism of the media, and a fierce allegiance to the African-American community and its history.
Myself and Hank Shockley were hanging a flyer of a gig that we were promoting, and we put the picture of Malcolm X on the front of the flyer, with him looking out the window with the car beam. This guy came up to us as we were stapling this flyer on the pole, and he says, "Yo, I'm down to check y'all out. Who's this Malcolm the 10th?" And we looked at each other like, this dude don't even know who Malcolm X is, so we have to kind of like reconnect the dots here.
People, say no one not the same, cause we don't know the game. What we need is awareness. We can't get careless out by Southwest. What is this? My beloved, let's go down to business, mental self-defense offenders. What was the show? Hey! We gotta go for what you know. I'll make everybody see and order to fight the powers that be. Let me just say, fight the power. Y'all got to fight, see what y'all. Fight the power. Let me just say, fight the power. Y'all got to fight, see what y'all. Fight the power. Let me just say, fight the power. You got to fight, see what y'all. Fight the power. Let me just say, fight the power. Hey!
The language is in context of pointing to a situation that we thought that needed to be dealt with. You know, oh wow, rock and roll king is Elvis, so black people don't count. And then there's such thing as American heroes who always have to be white. Yeah, you could be a hero, but you got to come through this doorway to be a hero.
Fight the power! You got to fight, say what y'all? Fight the power! Let me hear you say. Fight the power! Y'all got to fight, say what? Fight the power! Fight the power! You got to fight! Fight the power!
The most beautiful thing about hip-hop is the fact that hip-hop's use of the combinations of sights and sounds and reminders from the past with its vocal approach give it the possibility to go and do things that other musics might not be able to reach. We have that to replace what the radio stations and the radio DJs used to do and what they should be doing.
We created a darkness around this generation of young people in big cities. Bob Marley, for instance, in the islands, writes another genre of freedom song. And he can write One Heart, One Love, Let's Get Together and Feel All Right. Our kids have not gotten there yet, but I see them growing up. See, and they started out mean, and they started out mad, and they started out going for bad. See, now they're mellowing a little bit.
I used to flow, they used to call me a rhyme animal. Some of them don't call me no more. So I try new style, refuse to get wild on the B-side because I still got my pride. The pride comes from another time, my father and mother. Plus, God bless the rhyme. Born in 1967, suckers quizzing me what was it like before everybody tried to be like Mike. Back in the day when our peeps had to fight for our rights to make the day feel alright. But there is no is without a was. No about to be buts or because I got my pride. Yeah. I got my pride. Pride. Got to have my pride. Yeah. Reminiscing of another time. Died sheep, bells, the straight hands, platforms and picks. See, it wasn't just about the throw. It was what was underneath that throw. Black power for the powerless. Deuce in a quarter, cannons, 442. Yeah.
Music was going in a direction where the content of music had so dramatically changed that there was a lessened appreciation for the sounds of my generation. But in the last decade, that seems to come around because now what we're finding that in hip-hop and pop music, producers, artists, they're finding that there's a void in that evolution where the music lost not only substance but content.
Flamboyant names. Free you. Eldridge, Bobby, Angela. Woodstock, the Kid State. Music of the time before the minds. 45s. Aretha, Four Tops. Curtis Mayfield, Isaac Hayes. Assassinations, presidents. 60s soul.
Now, in order for us to know who we are, we got to know who we was. Then once we know who we was, then we know who we're gonna be. You dig? Pride. Bring them up with some pride.
All artists are not the same. There are some who's out there who are trying to recap what we had in the 60s or in the movement. I think they began to realize what has gone wrong within the last 15 or 20 years, and they're trying to make amends to this. And I think music will be the key, because we all love music.
Our people told our story with music, and so we will find some way of using music.
That's why blues is like, it carries a heavy load. Spirituals carries a heavy load. Soul carries a heavy load.
See, the one thing about great songs is that they have great messages. Messages that transcend time and race and ethnicity.
Rather than try to write a country's laws, I'd like to write a country's songs.
You may snap your fingers to one beat, I may snap my fingers to another one, but in essence, you know, the music touches everybody.
They're looking for music to be deeper in content, deeper in meaning and purpose. It's everywhere. More than ever before, music is the soundtrack of our lives.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river I've been running ever since. Oh, it's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. Oh, it's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Oh, when I go to my brother, and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me right down on my knees. Oh, there's been times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. Oh, it's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Oh, it's been a long time coming, but I know change won't come. Oh, yes it will. Oh, it's been a long time coming, but I know
movement before or after ever had songs like People Get Ready, We Shall Overcome, Respect, Blowing in the Wind, A Change Is Gonna Come. There were such powerfully emotional songs that came at one of those rare moments when the passion of the movement connected with the music of the times, and they gave birth to a brand new generation, my generation. Sometimes it seems like the pace of change is slow, but then there'll be an event like the election of Barack Obama in 2008. 30 or 40 years ago, and never mind 70 years ago, when Strange Fruit was recorded, it was inconceivable. Change has come, but slower than we'd like. The civil rights battle is not over. It isn't over here, it isn't over elsewhere in the world, but in some ways, in many, many ways, we live in a more equitable society. But we can always make it better.
You've been away, out of no way. Lord, you sure been good to me. Lord, you've been away, out of no way. Lord, you sure been good to me. Lord, you've been away, out of no way. Lord, you sure been good to me. Lord, you've been better to me than I've been to myself, been to myself.